Hey, amigo, I'm here. I just got to drop my screen a skosh. Ooh, Lord. How you doing? Ooh, you're on mute.
That's how I'm doing. I'm on mute. Let's just say I was about 20 minutes ago, telling my therapist, we need to move these appointments so that they're not in the middle of the day, because it's hard to come out of that and then jump into.
Oh my God. 100%. That's so funny because my sister was just in therapy. And so I was just like responding to some of her texts. Dude, it's a fucked up time right now.
It's just never-ending joy.
Never-ending joy.
And then, did you hear about Kim? So Kim Bradford is leaving the Alliance.
Oh no! When's that happening, or how's
at the end of the year? She's just got some her priorities have shifted as far as work-life balance and so on, and she just can't do it right now.
Wow!
But as you might imagine, that's a huge blow for us because she's a big part of what we do.
Yes, and I'm going to put my optimist hat on for just a second. Yep. There's a lot of talent in the marketplace right now.
Well, so now is the time, to as you hear of someone, I have space available, and I'm looking for that generalist who knows the space to come in and just kind of co-create this next gen organization.
That's awesome. Do you think you're gonna? For sure, the Alliance membership itself might be a great place to dip in, right? Or are you thinking you're going to go to the association market and think about what's available there?
Well, that's a great point. I was thinking more the first, actually, because we lose that 20 years on the ground in City Hall experience, and that is a gap, and I don't want to lose that.
Yep.
So yes, it would be within the membership. I'm not going to do anything until after Gavapalooza. So that's January and February, and then hopefully figure something out in March, and kind of spin someone up.
Yep. Okay, cool. Well, I can think of, a number of people to reach out to. So
great. Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that on our Monday. Monday call.
Yeah, that sounds real good.
How about you? It's like every week there's what year have you lived in the last week?
It has been insane this week, but it's because we're working on this huge project for a utility right now. Every utility has announced its net zero carbon targets. Okay. And I don't know if you know this, but like my wife is a big energy nerd. She was an appointee for the Obama administration. She worked with Stephen Chu. She's kind of the shit. Okay. So between what she knows about utilities and what I know about the future, we're doing this project together. I don't know that I recommend working with your spouse, but I don't know that I don't. Right. But it is like this week was our third major milestone, and it was a 2 days working with their senior leaders. And how when you have done this with every organization you worked with, you go through that messy middle part where people are just like, I cannot talk about this anymore, but you just have to keep doing it. And then you break through and it's beautiful. So we went through all of that between Wednesday and Thursday. So last night I wanted to just have a bottle of champagne and call it a day, but I couldn't because I had three opportunities today. Hi, Shannon. Hi, Benjamin. Hi, Jessica. Joel is very graciously being my therapist right now.
Great therapist.
Put a nickel in the jar.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, Shannon. Great to see you. You're muted.
I know. I know. Hey, my first time today. I figure if I can get through the majority of the day without doing that at least once, I'm doing okay.
I'm with you.
That'll be the teacher for 2020, right? You're muted.
That's great.
I already acquired that t-shirt, actually. The joke with this client I was telling you about was welcome everybody to Futures Friday. We are talking today about the county's seat, the view from the county seat. So, and in way of a setup, most people don't know what their counties do until this year, right? Because counties are the home of public health. Counties are the homes of mental health. Some people have said that counties do everything that no other unit of local government wants to do. So counties sit between these two forces, right? Between cities and towns that they help serve and between state and feds. And what happened this year was all the CARES funding that came out through COVID went through counties. Why? Because counties are at the nexus of all the big things that have happened to us this year. So we're talking today to three of our, I guess, brightest lights in this space, people who know what innovation means, know what it means to take the long look. And Joel, would you please introduce our three panelists today?
Thank you, Rebecca. It is my pleasure to look at the intersection of Alliance for Innovation and county management and see represented here past Alliance board members and current Alliance partners. We have Shannon Flanagan-Watson, the Deputy County Manager of Arlington County, Virginia. Hello, Shannon.
Shannon!
Tim is the County Administrator from Loudoun County, Virginia, just down the road from Shannon. And then all the way across the country, we've got Steve Morohisky. My God, Steve, I just butchered your name, and I'm Polish, for Christ's sake.
I've done it too. It took me a while to figure it out, Joel.
Steve's the county administrator from Lane County, Oregon, home of Eugene. And so
You pronounced Oregon right, though.
Go Ducks.
Here in Wisconsin, the city that is spelled the same, we pronounce it Oregon. So
yeah, I know. Yes.
We like to sit on our syllables here. So you guys because we gave you the run of show, but one of the things that we've been working on in these Futures Friday is how to sort of sharpen our own skills as futurists. And one of the key things, especially when you're in a blizzard of disruption, one of the key things that futurists do is they listen and they watch for signals. So signals are things that are kind of on the outside, they're on the edges. They're things that just kind of make you cock your head to the side and say, huh. So let me start with you, Shannon. We'll go ladies first, but what is a signal that you're noticing as it relates to what's going on in the county's space right now?
Sure. Thank you, Rebecca. One of the biggest signals that I am seeing is the acceleration of change, which has just, and I know I feel like I'm stating the obvious here, but the acceleration of change and the speed of which we have not only been responding to the pandemic, but the speed of which, just how quickly our lives are changing. And so, that's one of the signals that I'm seeing. I mean, needless to say, it's been a challenging year in many ways. While the abrupt change in March changed our daily lives, and looking back, it was no doubt initially shocking and surreal. The opportunities and the silver lining in all of this, at least from my perspective, is that we have found ways to adapt by working remotely, by delivering services in different ways. I'll just share one example here in Arlington. On Friday, March 13th, like many jurisdictions, we were providing building inspections in person, where we'd send an inspector out to a construction site, whether it was residential or a commercial construction site, to do an inspection. Within a few days, less than a week, we were able to adapt and move all of our inspections online. And so that's just, so I'm just sharing that as an example in terms of how we adapted very quickly in changing circumstances with many unknowns, but recognize the need to continue to deliver that line of service in a different way, quite frankly, to keep the local economy going.
That is awesome. I mean, what it reminds me of, Shannon, is like, it's like telehealth. Doctors were diagnosing things. So inspectors, that's what they do too. They have to diagnose things. Move that camera a little over to the left. Let me see behind that wall. Good. Steve, let's come to Tim. We're kind of going alpha by last name right now. So Tim, let's come to you next. What signal are you noticing in your space?
So a big one is just the availability of data and information. And so what it means is that us as county staff and people in the profession, as well as, and that extends even to our consultants and people that we use to help us evaluate and make decisions, we're just like one data point now, right? So it used to be that or certainly when I started in the profession, it used to be that we as county employees and public officials, we were kind of an expert, so to speak, in the space. And when we talked about things that we wanted to do in the community and ideas that we had and projects or whatever it is, solutions to problems, we were kind of, the one voice in the room. And so what's happened with, I think, the expansion of data centers and with the availability of smartphones and data really being available at people's fingertips, it's created a situation where as we get into complex issues, we become just one voice in the governmental process, and that includes with us advising our elected officials and our governing bodies, right? So they're getting all kinds of information from other places, and because this data is coming through social media and it's coming through in written form and sometimes in visual videos and things like that, the perception from many people is that there's a level of credibility that comes with that. And so that's really something that's out there that we're all kind of having to deal with. And sometimes we do a better job than other times, but that's definitely something that I've noticed that's there. It's not the newest thing in the world, but it's definitely been impactful over the past year.
That's fascinating. And I know sometimes it's really useful, right, to have additional voices of data. And then sometimes you just wish people would shut up, like you're trying to give the narrative here. Steve, what about you? What's one signal you're noticing?
I think about the way that we connect with people and how much that has changed. So my day used to be, I would get up in the morning and I'd have breakfast and I'd hug my wife and kids and go off to work for 10 hours. And I'd spend time then in my office. I'd have all these people, my day would be packed with meeting with people in my office. Maybe I'd go have lunch with a business person. I'd go get coffee with a resident. Then I'd go home and I was done dealing with people. And I wanted to just spend some time with my kids, read them to bed, watch the news, go to bed, do it all over again. All that has changed, right? So our social interactions where work used to be a lot of the place that we would go to sort of, and we'd spend a lot of our time interacting with people. That's not I'm in my office today, but I'm not doing a lot of interaction. Interestingly, I spend more time with people that are all over the country, like all of you. So the kind of seamless interaction and connection to people in some ways has gotten easier and is better like it is right now. But the connection I have with people that I used to, work directly with and know how their kids and their dogs and everyone has totally changed. So I think a lot about, we're spending more times in our neighborhoods, right? People are like, I actually know my neighbors. I'm walking and they know the dogs' names, but the connections at work are different. And so I'll just touch on, we're really thinking about how do we connect our workforce in this new way when people aren't present as much. We do every year a United Way combined giving campaign, a charitable campaign for our employees. And so we're thinking how are we going to do this? We did a talent show. Someone said, with the eye towards trying new stuff. I had some employees say, can we do a virtual talent show? I said, sure. It was amazing. We had 20 employees who submitted these videos and they were playing musical instruments and doing dog tricks and just so we got these insights into people's personal lives in ways we never would have before. And we also created these connections because we just tried something new. So just the way in which we connect with people, I think has changed, and a lot of this is going to stick. And so how we think about how we create culture in our workforce, how we create community in our communities, is going to be much different in the future.
I love it. I mean, what you guys are all showing with your responses is that sort of futurist, innovative mindset, right? And that's what brings Joel's and my organizations together, right? Alliance for Innovation, my shop thinking about the future. And you guys are like the embodied manifestation of this. You've all picked up a signal and you've been able to infer kind of how this might look or what still needs to be negotiated along the way or how things will change. So good on you. Joel, we're going to turn it over to you to get us started on the main chat. But speaking of the chat, we are lit up today. You guys have got some crazy kind of star power because Jackie Nunez, Amy Chekovitz, Linda Langston, Kim Bradford, Jackie's a +1, Aaron Hudson, y'all are getting in there with your signals. I love it. Together, we are making some good sense. Steve, your office has already got some jealousy points, so I would really watch your back, dude. Somebody's going to be coming for your job and for that office. Joel Carnes, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I wanted to kind of aggregate some of the signals I was seeing in the chat. Is this role of the county as convener and as holder of the region. So there are things that are outside of the county's specific remit, but that still fall under the county to kind of organize and coordinate and to hold a vision for. And we're seeing this in formal relationships like innovation leagues, or just informal approaches, getting together and talking about responses to climate or public health or equity and inclusion. But the idea of the county as this unit and aggregator of the local governments around there outside of the formal channels is definitely a signal that I'm picking up on. Before we get too much farther into the discussion, we wanted to make sure that everyone knew the panel at a deeper level. So I wanted to pose to the panelists that I want each of you to answer this question. At AFI, we have our pink guiding principles document that most of you are familiar with. Right on the cover, it says, "We've chosen lives of public service because we believe in something greater than ourselves." So to help the audience get to know each of you a little bit better, can you share why you've chosen a life of public service? Did you have a mentor that got you into this? Did you just stumble across it at a job fair? What was your career? I'm gonna go Tim, Steve, and Shannon. So Tim, you're gonna put you on the hot seat first. How did you get into a life of public service?
So I have kind of a boring story, but both my parents were in public service. So my mother was a public school teacher, and my dad worked for the federal government. Being the stellar firstborn that I am, I rebelled against that. So I started off coming in. I was in high school, and I decided I wasn't going to go into public service because most of my parents were in that, and I wasn't going to go to college. And so I decided I was going to go work for this company that had franchise abilities, which is Domino's Pizza. So I started in that path. Ended up my dad talked me into going to college, so I went, paid for a lot of it, but was working full time while I was doing that. Got to the end of my college years, and then realized that maybe that wasn't so great. I was actually delivering a pizza one day to one of. I ended up delivering to one of my college professors who I had as an undergrad, and he asked me what I'm doing. He says, is this an interim position? You graduated last year. And I said, no, I'm just kind of doing this, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next in my life. And he said, there's this thing called graduate school and a master's in public administration, where right now we're recruiting for teaching assistants. And as part of that, we pay your tuition, we give you a stipend. The stipend isn't great, but it's probably a little bit comparable to what you're making as a pizza delivery guy. So I ended up doing that. And of course, because my dad worked in the federal service, one of the things that I really kind of gravitated towards as I was going through my MPA program was, okay, I think I want to go into the federal government. But then I ended up at that time, transforming government was kind of a big deal. If you go back to the early 90s and talking about transforming the operations of government and make things look more like a business. And so I'd had this background in running kind of restaurant delivery operations. And I kind of said, okay, I think I can do that. I think I can I can, come out of this, go into government and kind of make things run more efficiently or more effectively. Because the other thing I figured out was what I like doing is just making things run. And so I kind of went into it that way, had some great internships as part of my MPA program, and ended up going from there into local government. And here I am, 25 years later or so. So that's kind of how I fell into this.
Was the pizza
beautiful.
pepperoni? I'm just wondering, was it we have a pepperoni pizza to thank for this. It's awesome.
Go
Most
Domino.
definitely.
30 minutes to a new career. Steve, what is your origin story?
Yeah, I guess I have some similarities to Tim. My dad was a physician. My mom was a social worker. I had no interest in, like my whole family is in healthcare. They're doctors and nurses and healthcare administration. No interest in healthcare, but my first job was delivering the daily newspaper in Madison, Wisconsin. I grew up in Madison, the Wisconsin State Journal. So I was 12
I heard
years
some
old.
Scotty in your voice,
Right?
Steve. I
yeah,
love
when
it.
I say Milwaukee and Wisconsin, it comes out. And it is Oregon, Wisconsin, and Oregon, right? So so I delivered a newspaper, Wisconsin State Journal, and I'd come back, and this thing of like taking people their daily news, and everyone was waiting on it. It was a big deal if you couldn't get the newspaper to someone's house at that time, not anymore. And then I'd come back and I'd have breakfast and I'd read the newspaper, and I was always interested in these stories of like the city council did this or the mayor that, and like, what's a city council or what's a board of commissioners, kind of like there are these people who are doing things here in our local community. So that was kind of informed some early thinking of mine. And then, in college, I studied political science. I was just always really interested in like current events, like what was happening in the community and what could I do to sort of be involved in that. I got an internship working for the Milwaukee County Executive, which is an elected county executive in Milwaukee, sort of by chance. I met this guy who worked full-time, ironically, a Black man from the south side of Chicago, who grew up in a very poor family, gets me, a young white man of privilege, a paid internship. And I'll say I've since, one of the things I've been able to do now that I'm in this role of influence is create a paid internship program focused on hiring women and people of color to get jobs in local government that lead towards full-time, because that was really my entree, right? I worked in DC for a little while. I worked at the state level, but I was like, man, local government is where it's at. Like, this is where we get to see the fruits of our labor. Where like you get to talk directly to residents and businesses and solve problems. It's like really cool. So that's kind of been my thing. And I just, I've never had any desire to work at the state I worked for a US Senator for a while in DC when I was in college through a program, and I lived on Capitol Hill. It's like such a romantic. I proposed to my wife on the tidal basin, like I love DC. But when I left there, I knew I never wanted to go back. It's just like, you're like a small fish in this ocean. I want to go back and do where the really important work in the community is happening. So I've sort of never looked back on that opportunity. Wow.
Thank you, Steve. And I mean, what a perfect segue. Let's go to DC now and hear from Shannon Flanagan-Watson.
Wow. Well, let me just say those are two incredible stories. And Tim, your story is not boring at all by any means. There's some similarities here. I grew up in a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs and medical professionals, doctors and nurses. And Steve, I knew that I didn't want to get into the medical profession, but the thing that really attracted me or what appealed to me about the medical profession was helping others. And so I knew early on that I really wanted to help others. I just knew I wanted to do it in a different way and not through necessarily owning my own business or through the medical profession. And so when I was in college, I had a student assistantship with the Dean of Student Affairs, who became one of my mentors. He had a legal background. really admired him, and I had started talking to him about law school. And I thought that was the way to go in terms of public service. And I'll never forget this. I remember sitting in his office and he turned to me, he said, "You know what, Shannon, the more that I hear you talk, the more that I think that you would be interested in public administration and public policy." And I remember turning to him and going, "Public administration? Tell me more." I mean, it was the first time that I had heard those words. And so I started researching, and it became clear pretty quickly that public administration, public policy was an area that I could contribute in a public service way. And as I went to graduate school, it became very clear to me pretty quickly that I wanted to do something at the local community level versus the federal government, whether it was in local government or working through nonprofits. I really wanted to make an impact, boots on the ground. And I feel very fortunate that through those experiences and numerous mentors, that picture became clearer. I've learned more about the local government profession. And, I will often say one of my passions is local government. And I've spent nearly 30 years either working with local governments or in local government. And, what other profession can you be a community builder and truly make the difference in the lives of so many people?
Yeah. Oh, man. There are two things about all three of your stories have two things in common. The first one is kind of the warm arm around the shoulder, metaphorically or actually saying, there is this path, right? This other path, whether it's graduate school or, a paid internship or public administration. And it just, for me, solidifies how important it is to continue to take an interest in people and to continue to put my arm around their shoulder and say, "I'm hearing this. You might be interested in public administration or in this thing over here." The other thing is what is coming through so loud and clear is how much you guys love to solve problems, improve things at the grassroots level, at the local level. So with this next question, I mean, I kind of alluded to this in my opening, but this CARES Act coming through counties, like you guys are now like the funnel for so much money that is supposed to help us find our way out and through. And what this pandemic has shown us is something that you guys have known for a long time, which is that there are I heard somebody say that the pandemic is like an X-ray on our public systems. And now we can see where the bones are broken, the bones of public health, the bones of public safety, the bones of mental health. So I wonder from each of your perspectives, or anybody can jump in on this one. I don't have a set order, but I wonder how all of this attention on counties has changed your county and in what ways.
Well, I'm happy to start on that and say, I think that, it was mentioned earlier, the profile of counties has definitely been raised. I'd say that in our local community, we have 12 cities in Lane County. Eugene, Springfield are kind of the hub, and then 10 other sort of rural cities. And they all have just like, the county has become the center point, the focal point of information and coordination and collaboration. And it's not just about resources. I mean, a lot of that has to do with the public health role that we played in the pandemic. In Oregon and in Lane County, we had a major wildfire. The Holiday Farm fire burned 175,000 acres, the largest wildfire in our history. That happened over Labor Day. We lost 450 homes, people been displaced. So then we had that on top of it. So there's just a lot of this, and it feels like even more so, both our community partners and cities, businesses, nonprofits, schools, universities, and residents are all sort of looking to the county to go, okay, what do we do here? Homelessness has been a huge challenge for us up and down the West Coast. I know it's a challenge nationally, but particularly in the West Coast, it's a crisis. And we've really tried to use I think these periods of disruption are, well, I wish we never had COVID, and I wish 275,000 people didn't lose their lives and we didn't have all of this terrible things that have resulted, I think it's hard to deny that there's also been some things that have come out of this that have, I mean, you talk about driving innovation, disruption creates opportunity. And so we've seen that with, federal dollars that have freed up very early on in April. We were like, let's go. We had talked about buying a facility for a shelter and navigation center. And we're like, let's just go do it. And we almost without thinking, I mean, we had thought and planned, but we're like, no, it's talking about risk taking a little bit, right? It's like, we're going to go do that. And we converted it into a COVID recovery center for homeless people who don't have a place to go. If they test positive, they don't have to be hospitalized, test positive. So we went and did that. $2 million we bought it for, and then we put another $1 million into renovation. Well, it turns out we got reimbursement from federal government and FEMA paid for so it was no cost to our local taxpayers. And these are the kind of things that I think counties are really capable of doing, but they're oftentimes viewed as like these clunky, bureaucratic, mile wide, inch deep kind of organizations. And I think that cities and communities are starting to realize that, counties not only have a lot of relevant services they provide, but they can actually get some important stuff done. So that's been our experience.
Shannon, I think you had taken yourself off mute. You were ready to jump in on that one too.
Well, and I would invite Tim's comments on this too. I'm actually going to offer a different perspective. And part of this is how counties are structured in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And in Arlington, even though we have county in our name, in essence, we're really serving as a consolidated city-county government, even though we don't have city-county government in our name, like other jurisdictions like San Diego's of the world, where they are, consolidated city government, or at least have both names in a consolidated form of government. And so in our 26 square miles, we do not have any incorporated local governments, whether they're cities or townships. So I always say I get the best of both worlds because I'm working in a consolidated city-county government. So in some ways, the pandemic hasn't really changed how, at least we're receiving, in some ways, funding from the state. The other thing I should mention is that we overall have a strong regional collaborative working relationship with our sister organizations in Northern Virginia, as well as the National Capital Region. So and this is not necessarily new, but it plays out, I would say, at least in Virginia, as jurisdictions in Northern Virginia versus the rest of the state, because we have very different needs than other parts of the state. So at least from my perspective and in my experience, it hasn't changed things from pre-COVID. But what I will say, at the end of the day, our residents and other community members, I don't think they really care if it's a city or a county. They want their local government in whatever form to be able to, collaborate and work and deliver resources and get as many resources as possible from the state and from the federal government. So Tim, I don't know if you would like to add to that or offer anything different.
Yeah, so, yeah, sure. I mean, we're, Loudoun's also in the Commonwealth. We talked about that during the introductions. We are a little bit different from Arlington from the perspective that we're much larger in terms of geographic distance, and we do have 7 incorporated towns within Loudoun that we work with on a regular basis for data. I mean, for support around the pandemic response. And you're talking about the CARES Act money. So the CARES Act money that we received was also required to be shared with the town. So we had to go through a whole allocation process with them and discussion with them. We're also responsible for how they spend their CARES Act money. So that's really been a large part of what our finance and budget departments have been working on. I think one of the ways that we've really been impacted, and one of the challenges we've really faced, and it's caused a lot of change within the organization, is that the nature of this emergency is not really acute, right? It's gonna, when all is said and done, we're gonna be in this posture for like 15, 18 months under a state of emergency. It's affecting everybody, right? So when we you know, any of us, anybody here who's been through like a natural disaster or anything like that, you know that while that impacts you for a time, there's always help coming from somewhere else, right? But here, there's no help coming from somewhere else because everybody's in the same situation. And so what we've had to do really is kind of put together this whole of government response, which is truly kind of a whole of government response. You know, with the emergency, certainly public health has been on the front lines. You know, in Virginia, we don't run hospitals, but some of you out there, particularly in other parts of the country, you may have hospitals that fall under county jurisdiction. So you've got a lot of healthcare workers and folks that you're also working with and supporting. And they've all done a phenomenal job. And, you know, but along with that, you have this political overlay that is creating havoc with pandemic response. You know, at the local level, we're kind of the ones that end up addressing everything on the street, right? I mean, because that's what we do. And so we've really been tested in terms of resilience, the ability to you know, come to work each day and help each other out. The other piece that's really different about this pandemic is the impact that we've had in terms of relying on our internal service agencies, right? So the beginning of the pandemic was this big procurement effort to buy PPE, buy equipment for our frontline EMS workers and health workers and people like that. So part of the back end of that is the opportunity to rewrite completely kind of procurement rules and regulations and how we do those things. I think it was Shannon that mentioned building inspections. We completely changed. So instead of having to go to someone's property to do the inspection, because we still have to do services, right? I mean, we still have to deliver those things. We can't just close and not do anything because, you know, the economy, which is very critical, you know, because government doesn't make money, right? I mean, it's the business community and people being able to earn a living and do things that pay for all of the services that we provide, right? And so I would say that focus has been on us. I think across the United States, county employees, Loudoun is no exception, have just been phenomenal in terms of their response, the things they've been doing. But the disruption that Steve talked about kind of has driven a lot of innovation at the same time, right? You have to completely retool the things that we used to take for granted, because now you got to stay 6 feet away from people. You have to wear a mask. You have to have a way to deliver services that keep yourself and your people and the members of the public and the people you're trying to serve, some of whom are critical populations or are in, you know, I can't think of the word right now, but are in a compromised situation or really we can't let them get infected, right? So we're coming up with these new ways of doing things and delivering services. And a lot of that's going to stay with us. You know, the pre-pandemic, and I hear this all the time, I'm sure all of you have heard this, we're never going to do more than 10% of our work teleworking, right? I mean, so that's completely out the window in many cases. And so a lot of that's going to stay with us. So that has impacts on what our services are going to look like post-pandemic, right? What's transit? What's the future of transit? What's the future of healthcare? We talked about telehealth. There's all these things that we do that are somehow going to be different because of this really compressed time frame where all of our worlds got kind of turned upside down, and we had to figure out how to do things differently and do things that I'm just telling you, prior to March of 2020, we would have said, no, we can't do that. But somehow we did. So it's been painful, but it's also been, I think, good in terms of the passion that people have to continue to serve the public and to move us forward and keep things at least a little bit normal or worthwhile. I mean, I don't know. That's a long-winded answer.
No, it's right where we're at, and I want to talk about moving forward actually. And this kind of echoes something that Steve was talking about earlier around equity and inclusion and really being more expansive. There's opportunities in this space that we're finding that weren't necessarily there before. Roger Martin just came up with a new book that he argues the government is too quick to pass policies and too slow to repeal or rethink them. So there's two sides to this question. Steve, I'll go to you first because you made me think about it in the first place, but it's like, what policy or procedure or just kind of way of being needs to be permanently retired, and what new policy or way of being should be considered to ensure that our communities are more just and equitable moving forward?
Oh, everybody drink. You're on mute. Let's make it a drinking game, everybody.
Isn't that the worst? You see, so, and then I look away and it's going into this whole thing and you're like, we can't hear you. It's still too easy to incarcerate people for minor offenses, people whose primary issue is that they have a mental health issue. This isn't a political statement. It's a statement about evidence-based practices and really what works, what interventions work and what don't. I talked to our sheriff, independently elected sheriff in Lane County yesterday, and he said, we've got, counties run the jail, right? Eugene Police Department, the city police department, has repeatedly, here's an incident of one individual woman who has just cycled through our jail. And the police department brings they don't have a municipal jail, so all of their municipal offenders come into our jail. This woman's criminal trespass, she's been arrested for over and over and over again. She has significant, severe mental health issues. Bugs in her hair, and she is one of the biggest challenges they have in the jail, right? It's not the hardened, the people we think about, the criminals that should be locked up because they're a threat to people, to our general community safety. This is someone who, for minor infractions, but a huge problem for local law enforcement, a huge management problem in the jail. She should not be in the jail. And we have 60% of the people in our jail have mental health issues. And you talk to the sheriff and the people working in the sheriff's in the jail, and they'll tell you these people should not be here. So they're the advocates for interventions, drug court, these treatment courts that you hear conversation about, drug courts, mental health courts, veteran courts, these diversionary programs that get people connected to services and keep them out of jail. But this woman is a good example. She's spending weeks in jail because it's easier for the local law enforcement for her to be in jail, because when she's on the street, there's nowhere for her to go, right? So there are these policies that exist around, it's escaping me now, but like mental health holds, and particularly in Oregon, it's really difficult to commit somebody, right? To commit them to an institution for mental health reasons. That policy needs to be evaluated. And I'm not saying it should be easy to commit people, but we need to have services that treat people for what their real problems are. And we still have a system, a criminal justice system. And I don't, for one, necessarily blame law enforcement for this. It's not an operational, it's a policy issue that, our federal, state, and local officials need to really address.
Thank you, Steve. I look forward to actually digging into that with you quite a bit. David's nodding his head because the three of us have been talking about this subject a lot, and we're going to kind of drive it towards Govapalooza and see if we can't expand that conversation. Tim, you're unmuted, so I'm going to go to you next. What do you think? Where would you like to see a shift? And what is?
Yeah, so I need to say I haven't read Roger Martin's book, so I had a little bit different take on how it was premised in terms of governments being too quick to pass policies and then too slow to repeal or rethink them. I think only about half of that's true, right? So part of what we experience is that a change in policy by definition is repealing something or rethinking something. I mean, that is what that process is. And so, but the problem is in a representative, at least in American democracy, I don't have experience in other democratic places, but in American democracy and a fundamental piece of a representative democracy is that the decision-making process is intentionally inefficient. right? So there's a lot of reasons for that. And we could spend days going into the discussions of why that is, but the decision-making process is intentionally inefficient. And part of that is to provide everybody who thinks they have a say to have their say. And so I think that has its own set of issues that we need to talk about. So along those lines, one of the things that comes in that, which is completely archaic, and I've seen many comments of this in the chat, is why in our official decision-making processes, does everybody have to meet in person? You know, why does, you know, so one of the things about the pandemic is we've been doing virtual meetings, which has just expanded access to the decision-making process, participation in the decision-making process to thousands of people that are not coming to the Loudoun County Government Boardroom to watch their board members do what they're going to do and participate. They may watch on a webcast or on TV, but the ability to participate has now been expanded, and the pandemic has shown us that we can do that. And so why shouldn't we be taking advantage of these ways of bringing people into the process that previously, for a number of different reasons, have been kind of not a part of the process? And so that's one thing that just occurs to me is something that we really need to take advantage of and to improve upon. Another piece of that is, I think he is right on the last part of the premise, which is, hey, we don't have a regular way of going back and looking at laws or regulations or policies that have been on the books for many years, and maybe we should. And maybe that's something that we need to start putting into as a cultural value into our organizations and the way that we work, because absent that, all of the things that we're seeing now is an expression of a change in values across the community that has been present for 50 or 60 years, but we're only now getting the momentum to focus on changes in certain areas. And so that's a problem that we need to all be a part of solving. And I think part of that is pushing the issue of, hey, we need to regularly review statutes, regulations, ordinances, and those kinds of things, which we don't do. But we also need to recognize in a democracy that decision-making process is going to be intentionally inefficient.
I don't know that I'd heard it put that way before, Tim, but I really appreciate that perspective of the intentional inefficiency. Shannon, would you like to chime in?
Yes, I would. I'd actually like to expand a little bit on Tim's example of being able to hold meetings virtually, which it seems so archaic sitting here and talking about this. But you know, one of the things that we're moving forward with is changing the requirement to hold public meetings in person. And it has just become so obvious in the pandemic. And this is something that we were starting to try to address before the pandemic. But in Virginia, it's a state requirement, which we're seeking to change through state legislation to give authority to localities to be able to have the ability to hold virtual meetings for public bodies during a non-emergency. So we've been given the authority to do it during an established emergency, but we're seeking to do this permanently. And we have seen, and not that we want to continue to be 100% virtual. I do anticipate that as we pull out of the pandemic, that we will move into some kind of hybrid, if you will, in terms of allowing public meetings to be held both in person as well as virtually. And we have started to see people participate remotely that we haven't, or they haven't had the opportunity, or it provides a much more convenient way to participate as part of the public process. So that's something that we are actively working on. And, you know, it's anything that we can do to not only broaden the outreach, but have more perspectives at the table, the better.
I love it. Aaron Hudson is saying, like, I just came from a meeting where we were talking about this very thing. Like, how are we going to permanently like mesh these two modalities and figure out how to make this work for more people and more effectively? It's a wonderful thing. So I'm going to toggle to England just very briefly. In England, there's a beloved show called Desert Island Discs. And everybody who's anybody in the UK seems to have been on this show. And one of the contrivances of the show is you're on a desert island and you only get to pack like 3 books or something. So that's one of the contrivances. What is it that you would pack? And, what music would you take and why? And then they play like the guests' favorite music and they say why this is, their favorite show. So it's like a little bit old fashioned, but it's like a beloved sort of feature of life in the UK. And I will admit, every person I love, for example, Mary Berry from the Great British Baking Show, she's been on Desert Islandist. I have learned so much about her just listening to what her set list would be and the book that she would take, which I believe she said would be the Bible. So big setup. Here's the simple question, y'all. We're going to go Shannon, Steve, Tim. You are on a desert island, possibly a terrible place to be for this question, but imagine that, okay, you know what? Imagine you have the biggest job you could ever want. And you had to start with one of these 3 tools: foresight, strategy, or innovation. You can't pick more than one. You can only choose one: foresight, strategy, or innovation for your biggest job. Which one would you choose to use first and why? Shannon?
I pick foresight. If one doesn't have the vision or the viewpoint about the future or some kind of horizon to be able to look out onto, then how do you know which direction you're headed? Even if that pathway there changes, you are striving and aspiring in a certain direction. And so the strategy and the innovation will follow if you have the foresight.
And I just want to point out, there are no wrong answers, but I really loved your answer, Shannon. Okay, Steve.
Well, you're going to hate my answer. I picked innovation because to me, like I think they're all great. So you need all 3. They all go together.
Joel.
No, but because my thing, I feel like innovation is the one action. So, foresight is the ability to see the future. Strategy is the planning for the future. Innovation is the actual doing. And apologies for swearing, but I'm a big fan of just doing shit, just like try stuff. My dad always said, shit happens. And I'm a big fan of like, just do shit. Right. So when people are like, what do I do? I'm like, when in doubt, do something. So I feel like innovation is that, that kind of trial and error. And when all else fails, let's try something. And if it doesn't work, then we'll try something else.
Perfect. All right, Tim, are you going to be the tiebreaker? Are you going to come in with strategy?
My immediate thought as you were leading into this was like, people are going to think you planned this, right? Which we haven't spoken to each other. And Steve, Shannon, and I haven't spoken to each other. And Joel, none of us talked to him. But yes, I would pick strategy because, and the reason is because I always, and my staff probably wouldn't be surprised about this, is you have to have a plan. You have to understand what you think you're going to do, regardless of what's going to happen. And so, if you can't predict the future, then you have to sit there and say, okay, have a very deliberate process of saying what could happen, and then work through every possible thing that could happen, at least practically speaking, and have a plan. And so you have to have a strategy for how you're going to approach next week, tomorrow, next month, because particularly if you're limiting me to one, right? So I don't have foresight in order to know or to understand what might happen tomorrow. I don't have the ability to be innovative, and because innovation's been taken away from me. So if all I've got left is, I'm going to say you have to have the ability to make a plan and be able to have different options within that plan, which is really what a strategy is.
Joel, could we have done any better with these panelists today? I mean, this is like, oh my God, it's just fantastic. So I just want to do a quick time check. Joel, let's do this next question. I'm going to forgo the other questions that I've got on the set sheet so that I want to turn it over to the audience. So what questions do you have for any or all of these 3 folks? Joel's going to lead them through this next question, and then we're going to come to the chat and ask your questions. Take it away, Joel.
Actually, Rebecca, looking at the time, I thought we might just go right to the plug zone while we can look at the audience questions.
Okay, sounds good.
I don't know that there's enough time to go through another full round.
I think that's a good idea. So you lead the plug zone. So you guys, get your fingers going here. We want to know what your questions are so that we can do some of your questions for this august panel.
Shannon and Tim and Steve, we want to just give you all a moment to talk about what's going on in your jurisdictions. What are you excited about? What do you want people to know about? I'm going to begin with a plug for Govapalooza. That's what's going on in my jurisdiction. We got a little 10,000 person conference coming up here. Woo, go David! We're partnered with NACA and Mayor Funk I see on the screen here. There's going to be a lot of familiar faces at Govapalooza. You can find more info at transformgov/Govapalooza, transformgov.org/Govapalooza. But we're going to be having mayors and council members and managers and county administrators and clerks and fire chiefs and police chiefs and bakers and thieves and lawyers and everybody else. And would love to see you there. Shannon, what's coming up in Arlington?
Okay, not unlike many others in local government, we have a lot going on, but the one thing that I am really excited about is our dialogues on race and equity. This is part of a larger, what we're calling race initiative in Arlington, which stands for Realizing Arlington's Commitment to Equity. And we have many different activities in support of this overall effort, but one of them are the series of community dialogues that we have been doing throughout the course of the last couple of months. And they are facilitated dialogues where we have facilitators that are trained to be able to facilitate these kinds of discussions. And we are out having community dialogues, talking about racial equity, how we can reduce disparities within the community, how we can take a look at our policies and our programs. And so through these, and these are all being done, they're small, interactive, virtual conversations. Everyone is welcome to attend. We're not only hosting them to the county, but we have many community partnering organizations. We have over 40 who have signed up, who are helping us in terms of facilitating the dialogues. And so I'm super excited about not only the effort. These are very challenging conversations, but they are conversations that we need to be having. And one of the outcomes is that we hope that we will be able to identify not only themes, but action items that we can begin to work on as we move forward together.
So that you can get shit done.
Yes, exactly. And even though I said foresight, I'm all about getting stuff done as well too. I do think you need to know where you're headed. But I'm happy to put the link into the chat.
Please do. Please add that link.
Yes, I will. And I'm happy to be a resource to anyone here and anyone else in the profession. We're learning a lot as we're going through this journey, and welcome lessons learned from others as well too.
Good work. All right, Steve and Tim, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit brief because I don't know if you saw, but the chat got lit with questions, and I'm going to do like not a firing round. That's the wrong lightning round. I'm going to do a lightning round. Steve, what do you want to put in the plug zone?
I'll do 20-second double hit on the Govapalooza, and that NACA is a partner of AFI for Govapalooza. So we're going to have at least 4 sessions. Excited about that. One of them I'll plug is going to be in partnership with the Center for Public Impact, which we're really excited about our partnership that we're launching with CPI, nonprofit wing of the Boston Consulting Group. They're all about innovation in local government as well. And it's about failing forward. So this idea of risk-taking in local government, of how we do trial and error and embracing failure as a learning tool in local government to create innovation. So sign up and then swing by the NACA tent and check out the sessions we have going on there.
Hemstreet, what do you have for the plug zone?
Yeah, so my other 2 colleagues hit all the heavy stuff. So I'm just going to plug Loudoun County and say that we're the data center capital of the world. So any of you that have bought anything on Amazon recently or anything else you've done, you've been in Loudoun County. But when you come visit to see what Shannon's doing in Arlington County, you're going to land in Dulles Airport. And so come on out to Loudoun County, where DC's wine country. We have a very rural part of the county. And then you can stop in and see some of the things that we're doing in the county government that are also quite innovative.
All right,
Let's
you
get to the lightning
guys,
round.
let's get to the lightning round. Let's do it. We're going to go alphabetical. So I'm going to just ask the first question to Shannon. Then I'm going to come, this is going to be by first name. Then it's going to Steve, then to Tim. Please be brief or I'll just cut you off. Okay, Shannon, first question. How do you as a county leader balance the need to get it right versus acting fast?
Let the perfectionism go. Just do it.
Just do it. A person after Steve's heart. Steve, coming to you from Stephen Thompson. Is anyone looking at substantially restructuring county government because of COVID? Charter amendments, state legislation, separately elected departments, et cetera. What do you got?
I've not heard that more. And I think that depends on the county, right? So if there's an opportunity to sort of look at wholesale changes, if a county's really struggling, otherwise it's an opportunity to embrace this disruptive period and try to drive the change that's necessary.
Awesome, Steve. Coming to you, Tim. What can we do to support county election officials going forward to ensure that people trust our elections?
I think be active in speaking out around making sure that we do have free and fair elections. I think that's one thing. The other thing is to be a poll worker. And if you work in county government, certainly if you're Loudoun County, we always allow you to work and support that process because it's one of the fundamental things that we do as a county is run.
Good work. Good work. Coming back to you, Shannon, as leaders, how might county organizations be the most successful at succession planning, really being planful, maybe in a way that hasn't happened before? What do you think? Succession planning.
Be proactive and provide opportunities for your employees to grow personally and professionally.
That's awesome.
Important things that we can do in terms of spending our time.
And I've heard the ELGL survey indicated that a lot of young people are being tapped to do things in local government that they had not been asked to do before. So it sounds like, Amy K., there's a real opportunity there. All right, coming to you, Steve M. As leaders and innovators, how do you leverage your position and privilege to make space to amplify marginalized voices? How do you specifically do it? You talked about the paid internship, but what else?
Yeah, that was a little thing. I mean, we're trying to create other opportunities. We have an emerging leaders program in our organization. We created that, said, hey, if you're not a supervisor or manager, but you you go through a 6-week program. We've had like 3 cohorts do that. I think 50% of the people that go through that program have been promoted within a year. So find ways to not only engage and empower the workforce, but create programs that lift up the people who are asking for more. Like your actively engaged employees, give them whatever they want because they're the people that are going to lead you to success.
This is incredible. So Tim, there's not another question, but I'm going to ask you, this is a question I'm going to ask you. What was the most insightful thing you, Tim, heard today at the panel?
Wow.
Yeah, well,
I was so focused on answering your questions. I think it's what kind of Steve brought out around how do we give a voice to people who traditionally haven't had one. And I think what he just said is a great answer, which is, we need as leaders to do our best to make sure that the composition of who works in county government looks like the community. And so we have to be deliberate about that. The other thing that we have to do or along those lines is be deliberate about going into those communities to make sure that they understand that they have a voice and to increase or improve the level of trust that they have with their government.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Joel, do you have any closing comments before I bring it home?
I just want to say something to the group, right? We see the same Futures Friday folks a lot, and it's great to have this community. I really appreciate people having their cameras on and sharing that community moment. So thank you for that, and for being here with us and not just making us talk to a bunch of blank screens. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and what I want to say is, I think about Shannon said foresight, Tim said strategy, Steve said innovation, and I want you to come and be the 3 EOs of my county. because that is a model that I think we could all get behind. Steve, Shannon, Tim, let's give them some love, give them a shout out. Every Friday, I think we've just had the Best Futures Friday, and I feel that way once again today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Take care, everybody.
Wave yourselves out.
Wave yourselves out.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Take care. You bet. Bye-bye.